Please close your eyes. Please close your eyes. And acknowledge your breath. The poetic self exercise. All you have to do is to listen to this voice and allow whatever thoughts, images, reflections that occur to occur, and embody what needs to be embodied. But first, please consider an element: fire, air, water, earth. Fire, air, water, earth. Please choose an element. When you have chosen an element, you may raise your arm, but keep your eyes closed. You may lower your arms. So imagine that this element of your choice is filling up your feet. From the tip of your toes to your heels. Allow this element to fill up your feet from the tip of your toes to your heels. And you breathe life into it. You breathe life into it. Through bones, muscles, flesh, veins, the blood floating in your veins, and into your skin, your membrane. You breathe life into it. And the element travels from your feet through the lower parts of your legs into your knees. Allow yourself to immerse in this element of your choice as it floats from your feet through the lower parts of your legs into your knees, and breathe life into it. Through bones, muscles, flesh, veins, the blood floating in your veins and into your skin, your membrane. And this element of your choice, it flows from your knees through the upper parts of your legs into your hips and into the lower part of your stomach. And you breathe life into it. You breathe life into it. And the element travels from your stomach and the lower part of your back through your spine into your shoulders and into your chest. And you breathe life into it. Through bones, muscles, flesh, veins, the blood floating in your veins and into your skin. Allow yourself to immerse in this element of your choice as it flows from your feet, through your legs, through your stomach and your back, into your shoulders and into your chest. And the element travels from your shoulders and chest into your arms and into your hands and into your fingers, every one of your fingers, and you breathe life into it as you immerse in this element of your choice. You breathe life. And the element travels from your spine, through your neck, through your throat, into your face, every part of your face, mouth, eyes, nose, through bones, muscles, flesh, veins, the blood floating in your veins, and you breathe life into it and into the back of your head and the top of your head and the roots of your hair and into your hair. Your entire body is now immersed in this element of your choice, and you breathe life into it. Now have these questions for your inner, inherent, poetic potential, your poetic self, the part of your being that you might or might not explore in everyday life. All you have to do is to listen to this voice and embody what needs to be embodied. Time. Please consider time. What relationship does your poetic self have to time? Consider time. Is time fast or slow? Do you get lost in time? Do you chase time? Are you chased by time? Please consider time. What relationship does your poetic self have to time? Consider time. Space. Please consider space. Do you mostly travel in your inner landscapes or into the external, eternal landscape around you? Consider space. Your inner inherent poetic potential in space. And how do you move through space? Are you linear, horizontal, vertical, circular, spiral? How do you move through space? And please consider the sensuous aspects of your poetic self. What is your taste, your sound, your look, your smell, your touch? The sensuous aspects of your poetic self. Your poetic body, and imagine that from this body you begin to grow roots, deep roots, through the concrete layers of this building, into the soil. And imagine that all these roots, they intertwine, they connect. Please consider the connecting body of your poetic self. Your connecting body. traces? What traces do you want to leave behind? What footprints are left after you? What traces do you want to leave behind? What footprints are left after you? Have no more questions for your poetic self this morning. In this peephole into your inner inherent poetic potential, in your own time and space, you may come back to this space and maybe consider a name for your poetic self, if you can name it. But in your own time and pace, return silently, singularly to this space.
Welcome to the Danish Conference on Wellbeing Economy. My name is Arvid Aagaard, and I have the privilege of being project leader on behalf of Wellbeing Economy Alliance Denmark on the conference, and I will briefly tell you about why we are doing this conference these coming 2 days and what we hope to achieve. Currently, we have transgressed 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries, and well-being is under pressure on many levels. Wellbeing economy offers a way to address these interconnected crises and also a positive vision for society. We have 3 goals for this conference. The first one is to use wellbeing economy as a common framework for dialogue and collaboration across sectors and political divides, recognizing that these crises cannot be treated in isolation, but they need holistic effort across society. Secondly, to foster public debate leading up to the European Parliament election. And thirdly, to channel the momentum from this conference together with the other conferences across Europe towards further engagement with these crises we're facing and shaping a new narrative in unison. So the conference is designed to address barriers for change in the current discourse. We seek public discourse that is centered on political dialogue instead of political positioning. Transformational change instead of incremental approaches. structural change instead of focus on the individual, a holistic perspective instead of silo mentality, and long-term strategy instead of near-term thinking. That is what we've tried to do with this conference. And on behalf of the whole team, Wellbeing Economy Alliance Denmark, and all collaborators, I welcome you here and to host us and guide us through the plenaries. We have the amazing Anja Bo, who is an acclaimed journalist, and she will enter the stage, and I hope you will give her a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The headline of this morning's plenary session is Wellbeing Economy and Economy for the Future. And I think in times of crisis, imagining the future, could you turn up my mic perhaps, or I could do something like this. It takes imagination. It takes wisdom. Is it okay now? Yeah, cool. And I guess it takes a lot of willpower to get to that future. And I'm happy to have no less than 7 keynotes on stage with me this morning. That is quite a lot, but it takes a lot, you know, to explore the future economy. And by that, I think we are making a quite important statement that we need to look. Perhaps I should shift to the other mic then. Are you happy now? No. Is this possible? Okay. Is there a technical skilled person here? There is. Perhaps you might be. This is time for learning, right? Thank you. Well, that's better, huh? Yeah, thank you. Modern technology, you know. Having 7 keynotes on stage with me is, of course, to broaden the conversation, to have more viewpoints of what we are trying to do. We are opening the conversation about wealth, about power, about decision making, the democratic debate. And of course, that is obvious that when you are together in a talented room like this, that kind of conversation will happen. But given the very limited amount of time that the keynote speakers have up here, I encourage you to reach out to them throughout both today and tomorrow. And as I can see from up here, it is easy for you to engage with them to broaden this conversation, to ensure our discussion remains diverse and remains inclusive. Did I say remain diverse? Yeah, okay. I need someone skilled up here with me. Katherine Trebeck, could you please, political economist, come up here with me, our first keynote speaker. I said diverse, and I think I need your help on this little exercise. Because this is a chance to get to know each other a little bit more, right? Somebody said to me, this is a very white audience. And nothing wrong about that. But could you raise your hand if you have a slightly different skin color than white? Thank you so much for being here. If you have a working class identity or background, or do you work with your hands, for instance, raise your hand. Quite a few as well. Thank you so much. I want. How many of you are students here in Copenhagen University? Or have been? Yeah. Have a background in economy in some way. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You have a question for Jørgen as well.
I
right?
do.
You do.
Oh, and it's working? Okay. Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think we have a problem with your earring. It's yeah. So I can just to have Katherine Trebeck with us today is a tremendous pleasure, and it is of course to put more solid ground on the expression well-being economy. We are of course looking into these interconnected crises both in Denmark and Europe and the rest of the world, and most of all I would say that talking about well-being economy, it is a framework for the discussion about crisis in context. And you will introduce us to the 4 P's, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do some kind of cornerstones to enter this abstract yet very important field. So a warm welcome on stage.
Thank you, Anja. Thank you. Thanks, and it's incredibly special to be here. Which means I speak very slowly. But I spent the last almost 20 years in Glasgow, where they don't speak slowly at all. So if the Glaswegian in me starts coming out, just sort of wave or something, and I'll try to become more Australian and speak slowly again. But as Anja said, I do have a question for you, because I want you to cast your mind back 10 years ago to 2014. And Barack Obama, as president, was at the United Nations General Assembly. And he was telling people there that he often tells audiences that they are living in the best time to be born. He says that if you're born today, you're more likely to be literate, to be healthy, and to be free to pursue your dreams. And I wonder now how you feel about that claim. 10 years on, where we're seeing climate records tumbling every week, where we're seeing inequalities now exacerbated by COVID and the response to COVID. And instead of building back better, we've got political polarization. So do you feel we are living in the best time to be alive? Yeah, some of you? Interesting. Great. Oh, a couple of optimists. We've got to be optimistic, hey, because then what's the alternative? But the World Economic Forum, I think, would say, oh, Barack, you got it wrong there, because they have pointed to, just last year, what they describe as the cascading and connected crises facing the world. And they said the scale of these problems are so enormous that it demands a new term, a term that you've probably now all heard of, polycrisis. The scale of the interconnected, cascading problems is a polycrisis. And the thing is that the late, great Donella Meadows, she looked at these sorts of problems and she said things like hunger and war and poverty and environmental degradation. She said they persist in spite of incredible technical brilliance and analytical ability that have been dedicated to trying to eradicate them. She said these problems persist because they are system problems. They are born of the system that created them, and they will only yield if, as she says, we have the courage and wisdom to see the system as the source of the problems and have the courage and wisdom to take action to restructure the system. And so that is what the next few days are about, coming together to learn from each other, to spend time with each other, to get to know each other, and to together build that courage and wisdom to transform the economic system. And so I want to say a few brief words about this idea of the wellbeing economy. The wellbeing economy is about taking very seriously what ecological economists have been saying for decades, what feminist economists have been saying for decades, and what Indigenous communities around the world have been living for millennia. And that is that the economy is not on a par with society and the environment, and it is certainly not on top of it. What we need to see is recognise that the economy is nested within society, and those two are nested within nature. And to take that seriously, to start thinking from that mindset, means we have to ask questions about how the economy is serving the needs of people and planet. And the simplest way I can describe a wellbeing economy agenda is basically an economy built to deliver social justice on a healthy planet. It is that simple. And so it's about thinking, how can we design the purpose of the economy so that it very deliberately meets the needs of people and planet. It's about helping people and planet to flourish and thrive, not simply constantly struggle to survive. It means about getting things right first time around, rather than spending loads of money reacting, repairing, fixing, healing, cleaning up after the fact. And so to build that sort of economic system is going to take a whole multitude of changes. It's going to need changes from the very, very local right up to the supranational. And so it's a little bit like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Each piece necessary, but not sufficient on its own. And so how do you get your head around a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle? How do you find the piece that you want to work on? So like any person who's doing a jigsaw puzzle, you tend to start with the corners, and that's where the 4 Ps come in. And rather conveniently, they all start with P. So purpose, prevention, pre-distribution, and people-powered. And so purpose is about really thinking, what is the role of the economy? Are we here to serve the economy? Or maybe we could just imagine an economic system designed to serve us and the planet and future generations. Who is winning out of the economy and who is losing? How can we really refocus our thinking about the economic system? Prevention is about saying we have to do better than just cleaning up after the collateral damage of the current economic system. We have to channel our inner 3-year-old and constantly ask why and why and why and why to get to the economic root causes and take action there upstream rather than constantly downstream responding to avoidable costs. Pre-distribution is about essentially asking the economic system, the market economy particularly, to do much more of the heavy lifting in delivering the sort of outcomes that people and planet need. And people-powered is about a just transition. It's about economic and political democracy. And it's about nature and future generations being at the table when decisions are made. So thank you all for being here. I'm extraordinarily excited to meet you all and get to know you and together build that courage and wisdom to restructure the economic system that we so urgently, urgently need to do. Thank you so much.
And Katherine Trebeck will reappear on the stage in the afternoon talking about experiences with well-being economy internationally. But let's dig into the 4 Ps. The first of them, purpose, how the economy can be structured to deliver human well-being while respecting planetary boundaries. Welcome on stage. We don't have much time, so hurry up. Joe Swinson, former UK politician, leader of the Liberal Democrats and a business minister in the coalition government, served for 12 years, oh my God, that's something, as a member of parliament and co-founder, and that's probably why you are on this stage, right? Co-founder of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Wellbeing Economies. Welcome on stage.
Thank you very much. And Katherine was influenced by living in Glasgow for 20 years. I'm actually from Glasgow, so apologies in advance if I talk too quickly. I want to take Katherine's metaphor and explore it a bit with you about this corner of the purpose of our economy. So I just want to ask, hands up, who has done a jigsaw puzzle in the last year? Okay, lots of you. So I think we might have some parents, grandparents in the audience, maybe also just some people who quite enjoy jigsaw puzzles, and no reason why not. I have to confess, my children are not at the stage where we're yet at the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles, but nonetheless, the strategies that you use, yes, you look for the corners, but also when you're trying to find what might go in a particular place, you often get guided by what it is you're looking for. You know, if it's in a wildlife jigsaw puzzle and you're trying to find the zebra, then your eyes are peeled for black and white stripes. If we're trying to find the corner that is the purpose of our economy, what would we be looking for? I want you to think about that in your mind. If you think about the word economy, or indeed what the purpose is normally said to be in our current system, which is GDP growth, if you think of that, what would that look like on a jigsaw piece? What colours would it be? What images or pieces of images might be on that jigsaw piece? Well, if you have a bit of a look on search engines online and you look in the images tab and you type in GDP growth, you get, and see if this matches with what you're were thinking in your head, you get graphs going upwards, you get grey and white and blue, and it's quite soulless. If, on the other hand, you start searching for things like thriving, human well-being, nature, just start imagining what those pieces might look like. The word well-being, if you type that in, the images you get, complete rainbow. Rainbow is the most easy way to describe what you get when you type in well-being. And when you start adding in human and nature, you're suddenly into people smiling, you're into green, lush vitality. These are the images of something which we might actually warm to, which we might actually want. And I think that goes to the heart of it. What is it that we want from our economy? Now, on my way here today, some of you might have also had this experience. I came out of the metro station and I was handed a leaflet. And I'm unfortunately not going to be able to vote in the European elections in Denmark. So it was a bit of a pointless waste of a leaflet. Not even going to be able to vote in the European elections in the United Kingdom, sadly. But we do have an election coming up. So I do get the opportunity to go out and knock on some doors. And in my time, I've knocked on tens of thousands of doors. And I can't recall anybody ever saying to me what they wanted was GDP growth. Right? That's not how people talk. It's not how people engage with the world. I've had people talk to me on the doorsteps about wanting different rules on dog passports or about homeopathy. I've had a lot of interesting conversations, but not GDP growth. People want an economy that is going to deliver the things that they need for their life, the health and happiness for them, their family, their loved ones, their community, a world that they want to be in and that they feel that can be successful. And that actually doesn't change very much, whether you go to one town or one city or one part of the countryside, or indeed between different countries. And yet our economy has become divorced from that. So what would it look like if we had the purpose of the economy being human flourishing within planetary boundaries? I mean, in a sense, it's very hard to disagree with, right? Who wouldn't agree with that? It almost feels like that's kind of what we should have, what our governments should be delivering. But the thing is the goal really matters. Because when you have the goal up there, so many things sit underneath it and they reinforce it. So you have the institutions, right? So you have Treasury and Finance ministries, we have in the UK an Office for Budget Responsibility, you have the forecasts that get produced, you have the cost-benefit analysis that say what decision can be made and what decision can't be made. Internationally, you have the IMF, the WTO, the World Bank, and they're all saying what has to happen. And of course, it impacts finance flows. Is there money for this? Can we afford to fight climate change? Is the cost of it too great? Or when it comes to basic safety nets or decent pay in terms of minimum wages, can it be afforded is the question, rather than this is the goal, how do we do it? And then, of course, you have the underpinning laws and regulations too. So if you instead had a goal of an economy that met human needs within the limits of what the planet can support, you would have institutions that would look different. You would have the existing bodies on climate change, the IPCC, even higher elevated. You would have perhaps the mechanisms of the Future Generations Commissioners that you start to see in some countries having real teeth. You would see finance flowing to the things that matter. You would see significant changes. And so what we need is to have that different goal, because from that everything else flows. We are then able to judge success on what actually matters to people, on that purpose of the economy. And so instead of celebrating GDP growth statistics, we'll in fact be looking at what happens on the Human Development Index, what happens on species abundance, where we're at in meeting our climate goals, and they will be the things that are taken most seriously. That's the world we need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to add that the cornerstone purpose corresponds to the conference track, the role and direction of the economy, if you want to dwell on that corner. Going to the next P, prevention, the root causes of economic and ecological crisis, and how to preventive measures, of course, can ensure planetary and human well-being. Welcome on stage, Inge Røpke, the first professor in ecological economies in Denmark, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Sustainability and Planning at Aalborg University. Warm welcome.
Thank you. Well, I have the task of discussing the root causes of the problems we have and the issue of prevention, the corner prevention. So the question is, why are we not fulfilling the purpose today, the purpose that we were just presented with? What are the root causes? From a long-term historical perspective, I will emphasize two important roots. First, the planetary boundaries, they are transgressed because of fossil fuels. Since the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels in combination with industrial technologies have resulted in exponential economic growth. Fossil fuels are basically great. They are high quality and a cheap source of energy. So we have had some energy slaves that, combined with the industrial technologies, formed the basis for a dramatic increase in labor productivity. And this also enabled an enormous growth in the biophysical metabolism of the economy. It's exploded so we could move around enormous masses of materials and appropriate large areas of land for human purposes. So it's really the fossil fuels that resulted in this dramatic transformation of the environment and now threatens to undermine the living conditions of humans and other species. The second root relates to that this long period of growth has served some but not others. Large global inequalities developed during this period. In the early period, it was colonialism that provided cheap labor and resources for the industrial centers. So a structure of center-periphery developed. And after decolonization, new mechanisms took over and, based on both military and economic power, maintained the large global inequalities in wealth and income. And these large global inequalities, they involve continued transfer of real resources from periphery to center, from poor to rich. So now to the question of prevention. What can we do about the root causes? Obviously, history cannot be prevented, but it tells us that we need transformative change because the problems are so deep-rooted and interconnected. It's not about marginal improvements. We need to replace fossil fuels, develop a new energy system, leave more land to other species, reduce inequalities, and ensure the fulfillment of basic needs for all.
Could you put the mic on your chin? Yeah, like that.
Yeah. But to do this, we need to change both provisioning and distribution system. So if we start with provisioning systems, we can say that we need to change a lot of provision systems, but take the food system as an example. It's based on industrial and it's fossil based, and it needs transformative change. There is an enormous amount of problems related to the current global agriculture and food system. We have both hunger and obesity, we have large greenhouse gas emissions, appropriation of too much land for animal production, monotonous landscapes, pesticide pollution, nutrient pollution, horrible animal welfare, antibiotic resistance, risk of pandemics, etc. And today, these problems are tackled separately. So we try to deal with each of them separately. But basically they come back to the system. So we need systemic change to actually do something about this. And that would serve as prevention of many problems. So systemic change is really the way that we can prevent many problems. Secondly, distribution. We need to do something about distribution systems, both globally and locally. Globally, we need to change the direction of transfer. So this is about trade agreements, tax havens, financial systems, regulation of transnational corporations. It's about fighting corruption, getting stronger trade unions, etc. And if we succeed with all this, the impact will be reduced material consumption in the rich countries. We cannot buy things as cheaply as we have been used to. But to make this transformation acceptable, we also need to change local distribution policies so that we can restrain the rich, not the poor. This means taxing wealth, inheritance, high incomes, luxury consumption, etc. And at the same time ensuring collective conditions for well-being, meaning collective systems for health and education and so on, and ensure food, shelter and mobility for everyone. So again, here it's about systemic change of distribution systems. And again, this will also serve as prevention of many problems, both environmental and social problems. So to end on a local note, I think to be a pioneer country, we need to combine responsibility for keeping within the planetary boundaries and contributing to global distribution with success in achieving well-being at a lower material level. So this is the local task. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this cornerstone prevention, of course, corresponds to the conference track root causes and prevention of crisis. Pre-distribution is our next P, our next cornerstone, how resources, power and opportunities can be distributed fairly from the outset of create an economy that works for everyone. Welcome on stage Ted Howard, co-founder and president emeritus of the Democratic Collaborative and action-oriented American think tank. And you recently joined the municipality of Amsterdam, helping to make a turnaround on a less fortunate neighborhood or part of the city there, which you have doing as well in Cleveland in the States. So you have a lot of experience on that. Welcome on stage. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anja. I just have to say, you all look marvelous out there. You're looking great. So I think this is the first time I've ever talked next to a flower that's as tall as me. So that's kind of interesting. So let us begin. The physicist and Nobel laureate Albert Einstein famously said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. We face many, many problems with our contemporary city, national, and global economies. We've already heard of some. We're going to hear many more. I would like to use my time, my few minutes with you today, to explore one of those problems, a problem at the very heart of our system, the fact that everywhere around the world, wealth is highly concentrated, and this inequality is escalating. Our economies may produce many things, but one of the most important, and one that clearly undermines the functioning of our democracy, is wealth inequality. Why should we care about growing wealth inequality in our nations and our world? It's a well-established fact that whoever controls and owns the capital of a society will have the power to set the policies, goals, and direction of that society. Concentrated wealth leads to economic and political power, which in turn leads to government policies that lead to even more concentrated wealth. It's a vicious cycle. To date, the way we have thought to deal with growing wealth inequality is to enact programs that help poor and working people through taxes and government transfer programs. In other words, the economic system produces great wealth concentration and inequality as a direct function of how our system is designed. Then, once the inequality is created, we try to tax and share some of the wealth to help those less well off. This is redistribution, and it is economic policy throughout Europe and indeed the world. Redistribution is better than doing nothing, of course. Without it, we would live in a medieval feudal system. We'd all be serfs. But it is not changing the fundamental dynamic. Everywhere, inequality is on the rise despite redistribution policies. And in many countries, including here, these policies are being curtailed within the neoliberal framework. Simply put, they are not working. We are creating more inequality on a daily basis, not less. Now, if Einstein was correct that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, then let us think together about how we might produce an economy that day to day produces more equality, not less. Almost unimaginable, actually. So this is a thought experiment for us all. An economy for the many, not just the few, an economy that distributes capital and wealth into many more hands so that all of us have a real say in where our lives and our society are headed. This is what is known as community wealth building, an economic model that transforms local economies based on communities having direct ownership and control of their wealth and assets. It addresses wealth inequality at its core. Crucially, community wealth building is not simply about correcting some of the worst injustices of our economic system after they occur. It is not based on partial redistribution once the problem has been created, but, and this is an awkward term, pre-distribution to prevent the problem in the first place. In other words, don't cause the problem and try to clean it up. Prevent the problem from occurring in the first place with a new design and new thinking. This is a new approach to our economy. A democratic economy that not only benefits those who work in companies and whose labor produces profits and revenue, but also behaves differently in the relationship of business and economy to communities and residents. Now, what might this look like in practice? We don't have time here today to envision an entire community wealth or democratic economy based on pre-distribution, how finance and investments would be made, how real estate and property would be developed differently, how markets would work, the role of public ownership, local and national policies, and much more. But let us look at just one element. How work could be designed and would operate to create real wealth for workers and their communities. And the place to begin that exploration is by changing ownership patterns. Who owns the capital, the business, the investment? Ownership matters. Most companies now are owned by absentee investors or are family-owned, what are called closely held businesses, or are owned by a single entrepreneur who once had a great idea and is building a company out of it. As these firms are profitable, the profits flow to the owners naturally. The investors, the family, the entrepreneur, workers get a salary, but the actual wealth flows to investors and owners. But what if all of us in this hall, what if we all owned a share, a stake in a company that we worked in, and designed it in a way that the profits and wealth that are created are pre-distributed at the point of production into the hands of the people who created those profits in the first place? In other words, all of us. This is not just a theory, it's not just a dream. I want to give you one example of a pre-distribution mechanism that exists now here in Europe, and then I'll conclude my remarks. So the world's oldest and one of the largest pre-distribution models exists in the Basque Country of Spain, the Mondragon Cooperative Corporations. Many of you will have heard of these. In the view of the people in Mondragon, the people who do the work, those actually directly responsible for producing the product or providing the service, should be the ones who benefit. They state their values as democracy, human rights, prosperity, and sustainability, not growth of GDP, not maximizing shareholder value. Their idea is that the business structure and practice must reflect these values. Since beginning in the 1940s, with one tiny cooperative with 5 people in it, Mondragon today is a network of about 95 cooperative enterprises working in industry, retail, finance, and knowledge. Their workforce is now 80,000 strong, most of whom are worker owners. In one recent year, they generated over 12 billion euros in revenue. Their economic theory is quite different from the economic model we live under. They see themselves as stewards of this capital that they own, with the responsibility to pass it on to their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, rather than extracting every kroner or every euro from the capital right now. And what has been the impact of this pre-distribution model? Mondragon has the lowest poverty rate, a little over 1% in all of the region. It has the lowest level of inequality and the highest per capita income. This is pre-distribution in action. So as Dr. Einstein suggested, this is a new and bold approach, new thinking. And let me conclude with this one thought. Imagine if we designed and implemented and lived in such a pre-distributive economy, a well-being economy. We could wake up every morning, and instead of bemoaning how terrible the world is getting, we could say, how wonderful is it that we now live in an economy that is daily producing more wealth for everyone, greater equality, strengthening our democracy by expanding participation to everyone, providing ever greater opportunity and environmental sustainability, simply because we intentionally designed it that way. Now that is a system I would like to work and live in. And I think perhaps you would too. So I look forward to building that system with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you are ready to build that system with Ted Howard, the conference track is, of course, Fair Future. People-powered, that's actually 2 P's in one. But come up here, Amanda Cahill, please. How economic decisions become more democratic and how to ensure popular engagement and involvement. Well, given my small assignment this morning, or exercise, this is, of course, a cornerstone as well. CEO of the Next Generation, doing just that in your, daily work. Thank you so much for being here as well. Warm welcome, please.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Amanda, and I'm from the land of the Aagaard and Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past and present. on the land that I am very lucky to live on in Australia. So I run an organisation called the Next Economy in Australia, and we work at a very local level with communities that are really struggling with change. And people can see all these opportunities, but they don't know what to do about it. And our job is to actually help people start to figure out what they want and how they want to make that happen. This is about people power. So we've heard about the 3 Ps. We've heard about purpose, prevention, and predistribution. But why do we need people power? If we can get the right policies in place, if we can get rigorous measurement systems, if we can make governments actually follow that and set really good targets, if we can allocate resources through budgeting processes, if we can get some of this right to actually put equity at its core, then why do we need people power as well? Isn't it enough? Well, I actually thought that for a long time. I thought if we could just get governments to do the right thing, then we could all get on with that. But I want to tell you about the time when I realised that that wasn't enough. Now, I don't know if you know, but for 10 years in Australia, we were deeply entrenched in climate denialism. And even though we had some of the best renewable energy resources in the world, we're also one of the biggest fossil fuel exporters in the world. And so things are very politically stuck and communities were very polarised around what to do. So a lot of us thought, as civil society, if we could make people aware of why we needed to change, and we could build a mass movement to demand that change, we would eventually get a government elected that would take meaningful action. A new government that would set meaningful targets, establish the right programs and funding mechanisms, so Australia could catch up with the rest of the world and start to decarbonise its economy. And some of us thought that in doing that, they would have to build a different energy system, one that decentralised power and offered citizens an opportunity for people to participate as local producers, as owners of that energy, as an essential good. Right? A fair assumption. Well, we finally got that change of government 2 years ago, almost to today, and action on climate change is accelerating and investment is flowing. And yet, much of what we're seeing is actually entrenching centralised control and a new form of green neoliberal capitalism. So on the surface, it looks good. There's movement. We have more ambitious climate targets now, and big business is promoting their green credentials. On top of this, we have a federal treasurer who's even talking publicly about wellbeing economy concepts and tools, like measuring what matters and thinking about how to do budgeting differently. Yet sadly, despite these changes, there are too many signs that really promising initiatives that could seed a wellbeing economy are yet again at risk of being co-opted and corrupted by efforts to keep the status quo going. And this is why we need the 4th P, people power. It's fundamental to ensuring that we don't miss this unique moment in history to fundamentally transform our economies into systems that will genuinely protect and regenerate people and nature. We need to fight for it together. We need to create it together, and we need to make sure that it sticks. If we look back to moments of fundamental social change, how change has been won and then maintained, whether we're talking about the abolition of slavery, women's rights, the right to vote, or racial justice, they've been preceded by communities getting organised to demand and work together for that change, and then holding the powerful to account to make sure it happens. So the 4th P is warning us against political naivety. At a time where the dissatisfaction with economic status quo creates both an opening to create a more regenerative economy, but also, unfortunately, is an opening for conservative and fascist groups to agitate and organise people for very different ends. The cost of living, war on multiple fronts, energy insecurity, housing shortages, all of these issues are leading people to question the status quo and ask for something different. But these issues can and are also being used to justify the erosion of many hard-won rights around the world. So it can go both ways. So we need a people-powered wellbeing economy. But what in practice does that look like? I like to think of it in 3 parts. The first part is the work that we need to do to mobilise people to challenge the status quo and make the case for change. This looks like unapologetic, bold movements that are highlighting the need for fundamental restructuring of the economy and creating systems beyond extractivism and economic growth, as well as art projects like we had this morning, thank you for that, that are challenging us to see and be differently in the world. We need courageous people who will offer us the clarity, inspiration, and political pressure that we need to create the space for new economic possibilities. So that's the first part. How do we get people to participate in that? The second part of the people-powered wellbeing economy is the work that we need to do to build the economic alternatives we need that demonstrate what the wellbeing economy actually looks like, that teaches us how to produce, exchange, and work differently. From a revival of the cooperative movement that we just heard Ted talk about, to food sovereignty initiatives, circular economy initiatives, new models of finance. Examples of this work abound everywhere, and we'll be hearing about that over the next few days. And then there's the third part of the people power element, and this is often overlooked. And that's the work of building people's capacity to manage the transition from the old to the new, while finding ways to embed new ideas, policies, and practices into the current systems of economic decision-making. It's the development of new policies, measurement tools, working out how to do taxation differently, et cetera, and it's about building people's capacity and confidence to actually participate in processes of decision-making. This takes time. But we'll hear about a lot of examples over the next few days. For example, deliberative models like citizens' assemblies, participatory budgeting, community planning approaches, or governance systems to enable communities to better defend the rights of nature and future generations. These 3 elements, the work to mobilise people to challenge the old, to build the new, and then manage the change, are all essential if we're to create the conditions for lasting and meaningful change. Because if we just focus on the fight, we're in danger of real alternatives being co-opted and corrupted, and of polarising communities that are already under stress. But if we only focus on the fight for change, without building people's capacity to participate in the economy in a different way, and to build new economic systems and practices, we're in danger of the movement burning out like a flame and fueling even more disillusion and conflict. We have all of the elements we need right here at this conference to engage people in productive and positive ways forward. The elements of a people-powered economy are right here, right now. And I can't wait to dive into it with you all over the next few days. Thank you.
And there's more people power in democratizing, I would say, the economy. That's the conference track. That was the 4 Ps. We got them now, right? No examination needed. But there's another P coming up, perspective, right? Fati and Hassane, Oxfam International Africa Director. What a title that is. Welcome on stage with me, feminine activist. We will have now a perspective of the South, a perspective of Africa. Warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. I'm not as tall as the flower. I'll try my best. Sustainability, equitable and fair access to resources, quality of life, social connection. If we agree that these are key elements of well-being economy, then let me remind you, or tell you, that Africa is no stranger to it. Indeed, research has demonstrated that many pre-colonial African economies were organized in a communal way, prioritizing the well-being of many over the wealth accumulation of a few. Today, the world is more developed, but this development has often failed to translate into real improvement in well-being. particularly in Africa and other places of the global south, where some of these traditional values, more compatible with well-being, have been overshadowed by an economic system obsessed with the illusion of infinite growth. But how do we truly measure well-being when the tools we use to measure growth fail to capture the full picture of human well-being and human development? Like many in this room, I think that GDP is overdated. It's an outdated, indicator. It clearly overlooks important dimensions of progress, such as income distribution, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. If I'm only considering GDP, it would appear that Malawi has been thriving in the last 20 years, with its gross domestic product multiplied by 5, from $2.55 billion in 2002 to over $13 billion in 2022. However, during the same time, secondary school enrollment went from 31% to only 35%, which is one indicator that maybe this economic growth has not translated effectively into positive human-centered outcomes. Using GDP is a mistake, especially in African countries, where it fails to capture much of the work that is done in informal economy, and also the substantial contribution of unpaid care domestic work. Oxfam research shows that 65% of the hours worked by women are unpaid care work. And these are hours that are not factored into GDP. We know how important this work is, and that without it, our economies would simply not function. A new way of measuring economic activity would be a feminist and decolonial way. It must also be informed by experiences of majority world countries instead of imposed in our parts of the world. This is essential for truly capturing the complexities and realities of our economic systems. From this broader perspective, we can look at well-being economy not only at communal, national levels, but also from the most macro level. A global well-being economy cannot be built on an arrangement where only a few countries make the rules and the rest of the world have to comply. African countries should not be the playground of a capitalist and colonial international financial system. We must be part of the game as full-fledged players. I would like to finish by mentioning that 15 years ago, the COP15 took place here in Copenhagen. 13 COPs later, climate change remains the biggest threat to humanity. We are off target on our emission reduction goals, and the world is in a full-fledged climate crisis. The irony is that the people the least responsible for global warming are the ones suffering for the most from the consequences of the rich countries' reluctance to cut down their heavy emissions and to pay for the loss and damages their activities have caused. To reach the objective of a global well-being economy, we must seek neither economic development nor change, incremental change, but economic transformation at all levels. We must urge governments to implement gender-responsive fiscal policies and to invest in inequality-busting sectors: health, education, social protection. We must reform the international financial system that we have inherited from the colonial period, a system that is capitalist and founded on profiteering rather than shared prosperity. For well-being economies to become a reality, we must explore degrowth policies that prioritize sustainability, equitable and fair access to resources, quality of life, and social connection. I thank you.
Thank you so much. And further discussions on global perspectives will be in, well, everywhere, of course, but in conference track Well-being Economy in a global perspective. Well, transformation through nature and culture, we could add the P participation, right, Gry? Yeah. Welcome on stage with your whole poetic self, and thank you so much for your performance earlier. I think we should applaud that as well. And of course you do Sisters Hope, the award-winning performance group, but you also hold a PhD on aesthetics and ecology, transformative potential of art. It's about, of course, and we are about to hear about the importance and value of aesthetics, poetry, and the senses. The floor is yours.
Thanks.
Once again.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm talking from an artistic perspective into this economic forum. And so Sisters Hope was founded by me and my poetic twin sister in 2007. Therefore, it's called Sisters Hope. And in 2008, we wrote the manifest, the Sensuous Society Manifesto. By sensuous, I actually mean sense-activating, the sense-activating mode of being and being together in the world. So that's in the name sensuous. So the Sensuous Society Manifesto was written as a response to the financial crisis of 2008, where this practice also very much originated, and as a response to the ongoing ecological crisis. And I think it can be perceived as a response to crisis in general, the poly-crises that we heard about. So the manifest suggests a potential future world governed not by economic rationality at all. So it's not just restructuring economy. It's saying or asking or suggesting a potential new paradigm that where the aesthetic dimension, the artistic dimension that has the aesthetic experience and perception and action at its core as the organizing principle. So it asks, what would the world be like if we were living in a sensuous society where the aesthetic dimension is the organizing principle? So that's the core question of the manifest. It's not presented as a utopia because we haven't lived it. It's just a suggestion. And then, of course, if we were to live in a sensuous society, probably new dysfunctionalities would arise as well. We don't know. But it could also be maybe a bridge towards a more sustainable way of organizing society, because the aesthetic has been highly under-prioritized since the industrialization as well. So it's been a realm of life that has been colonized in the art system, which is more or less exclusive and hasn't really had a voice or an impact outside that system. So we have this double hierarchy of perception, where at one hand we celebrate the artist as someone special with a special transcending intelligence, and within the art system everything is possible, but that came with the cost of impact outside the art system. So the Sensuous Society Manifesto is both a critique of the art system and its exclusiveness, and we talk about democratizing the aesthetic by opening the access to more sensuous and poetic spaces to the general public, on the one hand, and on the other hand, a critique of current civilization that does not listen to art or the aesthetic experience of the world when decision-making is made. Historically, Joseph Campbell, a researcher of myth and rituals, also talked about how societies change all the time. So in this part of the world, at least from the Antique up until the Enlightenment, we have the churches. That's the tallest building. He suggests that we can look at a cityscape to see the governing paradigms. So everything is organized around the church. Artists create for the church. The monetary system, the economic system, is organized systemically around religion. And if you're lucky enough to get an education, you're taught by Jesuits. And then, of course, in this context, the civil wars and the political dimension and the city halls are built and are now the tallest buildings. And they are slightly taller than the churches. And then, of course, since the industrialization, the financial centers. So if we consider economy, politics, religion, and art to be pillars of society, art is the only one that has not yet governed society. So we could think about what would the tallest building be in a sensuous society. Maybe it wouldn't be a new tallest building, but another shape. I don't know. Maybe that symbolism would stop. But so in our practice in Sisters Hope, we take the Sensuous Society Manifesto as a starting point for our performances. So in our performances, we create large-scale immersive universes. And in those universes, we invite everyone to inhabit a sensuous society. So it's not just a scenario, a thought pattern, or an idea. It's an embodied, lived, tactile experience in our worlds. So, and right now we actually have a 5-year performance piece in Hedehusene in Københavns Vestegn, in the outskirts of Copenhagen. So if you want to come and inhabit a sensuous society, feel free. Only thing is you have to stay for at least 24 hours to get the full experience. And many stay for much longer. Because once you begin to inhabit the more sensuous and poetic aspects of life, it has healing potential that people, that kind of, it triggers a collective longing, in my experience, kind of underpinning the hypothesis that the sensuous and poetic has been too under-prioritized, and it might be one of the medicines towards this more sustainable future. So that was also the question in my PhD, at an artistic research PhD, where I read 800 notebooks from participants that all, in a combination of aesthetic philosophy and ecological thinking. And in the ecological thinking, of course, we have the idea of connectedness as a stream through the arguments, that we have to create a new epistemology where we realize that everything is connected, because we think in separatism, another dysfunction of the economic system. So I was reading more than 800 notebooks from participants. That was quite a lot. And all talked about feeling more connected, both mentally, socially, and environmentally, which to me was really interesting. So when you allow people to inhabit and immerse in a more sensuous and poetic environment, what it brings out is actually this new epistemology and new ontology of thinking and being more connected in real time. So therefore, in conclusion, we also talk into the artistic world and recommends a movement away from both spectatorship and temporary participation into more permanent inhabitation of the arts, to create artwork where people are invited to inhabit the arts on a more permanent basis, which you could call deep participation.
The last P. Thank you so much. And we have a very ambitious time schedule, so I'll ask my P keynote speakers to join me on stage, all of you. And I did prepare some questions which I think will skip, but still, come. Plenty of space up here. Yeah. In the welcome, Arvid said that he talked about momentum, about optimism, about gathering today, and I know that some of you might be a bit skeptical about how we are supposed to change society in, well, quite just a few years, because we are quite in a hurry. And you said to me that we have heard before the I don't know, the connection to the north from the south, trying to rebuild a relationship, you could say. But tell me about your skepticism.
Yes, I think we can all agree that it takes a lot of money to deliver social justice on a livable planet. When you look at the perspective from the South, there's been not even promises, but commitments from the G7 countries since the 1970s to allocate 0.1% of the revenue to global South countries so that they can invest in their development. There's also been commitments since COP26 to allocate $100 billion per year to mitigate the effects of climate change. And these commitments have not been met. So we had a study last year, we published it last year as Oxfam, where we demonstrated that the North owes global majority countries over $13 trillion to finance development. And
we'll keep that number in mind the rest of the day. Thank you.
Based on existing commitments. So we're not even talking about the new loss and damage fund, the new green climate fund, but really the commitments that are standing and that the North are not delivering on. So global solidarity also comes in play when you talk about global well-being economy.
Inge, Røpke, you're still working on your optimism, I know, these days, whether this is momentum or not. But you said to me on the phone the other day that we have to ask ourselves the key question: are we fighting or are we sharing? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that we have this problem that when we talk about politics, for instance, in Denmark, then usually everybody tends to agree that, of course, we want to follow the purpose that has been presented and so on. So it's very difficult to see what do we disagree about. And sometimes I think that there are two main disagreements. One is about technology. How much do we believe in technology? And the other disagreement relates to what you are talking about. Should we actually share with other people? And obviously, it's a much, much larger challenge we face if we also want to share. So therefore, I think this question, should we share or should we fight, is key to the political discussions.
Ted Howard, can I ask you, you work with the grassroots and you work with the municipality, you work with both high stakes and those in need, you could say. The motivation from the society, from the government, from the municipalities, is that a stronger motivation than from the grassroots, as meaning the people who needs to be empowered, perhaps?
Thank you. I'm sitting down because I have a leg problem. It's not that we're trying to equalize the height here. No, I think from the ground up, the motivation is much stronger. I think from the top down, there are just certain realities that political leaders are confronting that you simply can't keep going down this path the way it is, or we're going to have a complete mess. I think my own personal theory of change around this, I don't elevate the grassroots onto a podium and say they have all the wisdom, nor do I think the big institutions and power has the wisdom. They need to come together. Together, really meaningful change can be made. One example, I work a lot with what are called anchor institutions, large universities, hospitals, and so forth, on their purchasing power. How do they make decisions about what they're going to buy in terms of goods and services? The municipality of Amsterdam spends 2.8 billion euros a year on goods and services. But I'm working in a neighborhood called New West District, where only 5% of that $2.8 billion goes to that district's businesses, but they represent 20% of the city's population. So if we can bring the municipality's economic power together with the desires and the needs of the community, I think there is the opportunity for some transformative change.
And talking about people power, the arena in which we make decisions, when Ted Howard says that he doesn't believe actually that all the wisdom is within that community necessarily, but how do you broaden the decision room for those who don't have any access at all?
Yeah, I think Ted hit on it, and what we've been finding a lot is it's very hard if we just look at the picture, like the big picture. The more you get down into doing a place-based analysis, like careful analysis in each place and having that conversation and having meaningful ways that people can involve in that. I'm not talking about everyone has to participate in every decision, but where there are moments, and every community has things that they're struggling with, to have really good facilitation of highlighting what that is. They are the ones that are analysing where the opportunities are, but actually then creating the capacity to tap into resources, expertise in the system. What's really interesting though, we keep forgetting, and this has been a real learning for me, is that actually a lot of the people in power also feel just as disempowered and overwhelmed as the people on the ground. They don't actually have all the answers as well. And so actually creating the spaces to feed what we're learning from the ground into those other spaces of decision making, but then connect them back into the ground. And we just took a bunch of investors and federal government into one community we worked in, and it completely changed their perspectives on what their job is. And they're going back to redefine their roles. So it's how do we create that space for that movement across different spaces? And we have one way, technology, to actually enable that to happen more.
Can I ask you, Swinson, you worked with formal power both in Parliament and as a minister. It's amazing, of course, but sometimes I get the feeling that we have to perhaps look into a different kind of power play to make it more legit in a way, to have more voices. Do you see our forums change radically in the future?
I think so many of our systems are not fit for what this century needs of us, and that is as true of our political systems as it is true of our economic systems. So definitely reform is needed of that, and I think trying to ensure that people power, elections can be one mechanism, but democracy isn't about an election every 4 years. It's about how people can be engaged in the decisions that affect their lives. And if you can successfully deal with some of that alienation, then I think you can actually get the support for some of the very significant transformations that are needed. And, people are scared. And when people are scared, it is very difficult to get people to be open, to share, and to embrace the changes which are necessary. And I think we can paint a more positive, joyful vision of what it is. I mean, we all get sometimes overwhelmed by the scare of the statistics and of what's happening. But actually, we're talking about a world where we focus on the things that really matter. There is so much joy out there. It can be done, and that can be a more attractive vision than doom and gloom. I just wanted to very quickly respond to that wonderful image you gave us of the cityscapes and what is the highest, because that really struck home for me when I was thinking about it. I hadn't conceived of it in that way before. And I was just thinking that maybe what's missing is that we've built these cities with these taller and taller and taller buildings now, in some of the cases, out of all proportion with what seems natural. Maybe the tallest structure within a city should be the tallest tree.
Just a quick response on that.
I think that was like a perfect ending, actually. So I don't have more to say.
Thank you so much for being so brilliant, panel. Thank you. Just leave it. And Arvid, I hope you're not in any way depressed now, since the panel was a bit skeptical on your optimism and on your momentum? I'm trying to give you this mic because come on, join me on stage, because I know you have some info. I've been trying to talk about the tracks during the conference and how to find it. Have you got some news for me?
I do. And I will just say that this conference has been devised since January by people who have never worked together. So we embrace things that may not be perfect. We strive for honesty and creating a forum where we embrace the fact of life that, nothing is perfect. So when you go out of this plenary hall, you might be finding your way to some session. If you are unsure where it is, you can go to the website, download a PDF of the map. You may also go, if you need a printed version, go to the service point where there are printed versions of the map. And if you are unsure, you can always ask the people in yellow vests. No pun intended there.
So go have a great time, have some wonderful conversations, workshops. Do you guys, and we meet in here in the afternoon. I think 20 to 4, and until then, have a great time. Thank you.